We know that to solve a triangle that is not a right triangle, we need to use either the law of sines or the law of cosines. The question is, how do you know which one to use? And that is what we're going to address in this video. Okay. Law of sines versus the law of cosines. How do we know which one to use? We know that if you have a right triangle, if you have a triangle that is not a right triangle, you can use either the law of sines or the law of cosines. If it's a right triangle, just use the trig functions themselves and it's easy to work. But if it's not a right triangle, how do you know which of those two laws you should be using? To use the law of sines, one of the things that you must have is the measure of an angle and the length of the side that is opposite that angle, because the law of sines uses the ratio of an angle measured to the side opposite. So we have to have one pair in order to use the law of sines. Sometimes you're given an angle and a side opposite. Sometimes you're not, but finding the measure of an angle opposite a side you're given is easy. And we'll talk about that. And if that's the case, then you can use the law of sines. On the other hand, if you don't have and there's no way to find the measure of an angle or rather, and the length of the side opposite the angle, then that's what the law of cosines is used for. And you'll see the situations where that happens. There are 5 situations that we will be looking at. And the law of sines is used to solve triangles in 3 of those specific situations. So let's talk about that. The first one is if you have the measure of 2 angles and the length of the side that is not between the 2 angles. So I'm going to draw a triangle, a poorly drawn triangle, but I'm going to draw a triangle. What we've got is the measure of 2 angles. So here's angle A, we've got that measure. Here's angle B, we've got that measure. So we have 2 angles. And we have the length of a side that is not between the 2 angles. So I will arbitrarily pick A, that we have the measure of the length, or rather the length of the side A opposite angle A. And there's your pair. There we've got A over the sine of A. And we can use that pair as our anchor to find side B, to find angle C, and side C. Okay, so there's your anchor, and that's how you can use the law of sines. So if you're given 2 angles and the length of a side that is not between the 2 angles, you can use the law of sines to solve the triangle. Second situation where you use the law of sines. If you have the measure of 2 angles, okay, a little bit better triangle. So if you have the measure of 2 angles, there's angle A and there's angle B. And I'm, by the way, arbitrarily picking angles A and B. I'm not picking angle C for no good reason. You could have A and C or B and C, and this situation still holds true. And if you have the measure of the 2 angles and the length of the side that is between the 2 angles, that means this has to be side C. If you have these, you can use the law of sines. But when you look at this, you say, wait a minute, how do I use the law of sines? I don't have an angle with a side opposite. But in this case, because we're given 2 angles, it's really easy to find the measure of angle C, because we know that the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B, when you add those up and subtract them from 180 degrees, you know that that gives you the measure of angle C. Really easy to find. And once you've done that, you now have angle C and side C. And that becomes your anchor to find side A and side B. Okay, so that's the situation where if you're given 2 angles and the side between them, you find the 3rd angle and then you solve the triangle. Obviously, both of these situations and the next one as well are covered in the law of sines stream of videos. Okay, let's go to the 3rd situation. If you have the lengths of 2 sides. So this time we have the lengths of 2 sides. So I'm going to give us angle side A and side B. and the measure of an angle that is not between the two sides, angle A, like so. If we have this, then we've got a pair, side A and angle A are given, and we can use the law of sines to help us solve this triangle. There's your anchor, A over the sine of A. Now, I will say this case where you have two sides and the angle not between them is called the ambiguous case. So it in of itself has 6 different situations that could happen. And again, the law of sines video, that stream will address this ambiguous case of the law of sines. Regardless, the only way to solve this triangle is to use the law of sines. Okay, so those are the 3 situations where you've got the law of sines and we can use the law of sines. Then we've got the law of cosines. How do we use the law of cosines? If you're given the lengths of 2 sides and the measure of the angle between them. So let's say we're given side A and side B, that's a length of 2 sides, and the angle between them, angle C. There is no way to find a pair. We can't find angle A, we can't find angle B in this situation. We don't have enough information to do that. We can't find side C because there's no analogous formula to the Pythagorean theorem to help us find side C. So the only way to solve this is to use the law of cosines. And when you use the law of cosines, you're going to look for the length of side C. And once you find that, then what you've got is C over the sine of C, and you can actually drop back into the law of sines using that as your anchor, but you had to find side C first using the law of cosines. Okay? And then there's one more. What happens if you are given all 3 sides? If you're given all 3 sides, so you got A, side B, and side C, and none of the angles, well, clearly there's no way you got a pair. There's no way to find the measure of any of those angles easily. And what you have to do is use the law of cosines to do that and find, and I'm not going to go through the law of cosines here. The law of cosines video will address that. But if you're given all 3 sides, that's when you use the law of cosines. Okay, so hopefully that helps you decide which of the 2 laws you use in what situations. And now is a good time, depending on which of those laws you need to look at. You can go look at the video for the law of cosines or the law of sines, both of which address all of those in detail.